You are listening to the Draft Show on the All Hornets podcast network, one podcast feed with multiple shows, making sure we cover the Charlotte Hornets from every single angle. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. The All Hornets podcast is affiliated with the Fans First Sports podcast group. Today's show, we are doing another one of our scouting deep dives into a name that is hot on the lips of Hornets fans following an ESPN report. Dalton Knecht, the Tennessee Volunteer, shooting guard, small forward, sharpshooter, 23-year-old senior who is projected to go somewhere in the mid-lottery. Chase, where is Dalton Knecht on your board?
So I think I'm going to preface this by saying that I have a very large tier that he is in that extends a lot higher than where I have him. But I will say I am going to be one of the lowest draft people on Dalton when it comes to Dalton Knecht. I have him at number 19 on my draft board. I'm not buying the top 10 or really lottery hype for Dalton Knecht at all. Though I do think obviously having him at 19, there is a route to being an NBA player. Just a much narrower one than many of the people above him in this draft, in my opinion.
Look, I've known you long enough now to know that one of your draft icks is age. And Dalton Knecht is going to be 23 years old on draft night, which we were talking before the show. We think would make him the oldest ever lottery pick in the NBA, like in the modern NBA. There might be others out there. I've not had a chance to search it, but we went through like a bunch of drafts and we couldn't think of anyone. So that would certainly be, an impressive feat to have. And a guy who played at JUCO college. He played, I think, 2 years at Northern Colorado. He had to go to JUCO because he had academic issues coming out of high school and just exploded at a high major program this year with the Tennessee Volunteers. I think you have Dalton Knecht 19. I have him, I think, 11. Was it 11, did I say before the show?
Yep.
So, again, probably a little bit rich for me at 6. Definitely too rich for you at 6. But again, I agree with you. He is in my large pool of players who's like goes from basically 4 to 15. So he is in there, and there are certain fits for the Charlotte Hornets that I can see. But let's get into a little bit of the scout about Dalton Knecht. Let's start with the strengths, and scoring package is pretty well refined. I think that's the first thing you need to go through with Dalton Knecht. He shot 40% from 3 this year on 6.5 attempts per game. Had some absolutely huge games all season against good teams. He dropped, I believe it was a 40-piece on Kentucky, which was a huge impressive game. He dropped a huge game in the last game of the NBA tournament, of the NCAA tournament, had 37 against Purdue. He had 39 against Auburn. Like, these are some big major programs with good defensive teams, and he was able to get off. And he did that through his three-point shooting. He has a little mid-range pull-up game that if you run up off the line, he will happily get to. And I think maybe the most underrated thing with Knecht, because as soon as you see him, you go, oh, he's a shooter, which he is actually his ability to finish at the rim, which is pretty impressive for someone of his size. He's 6'6", 6'9" wingspan. And actually has good athleticism and bounce. He isn't one of these like stiff, Doug McDermott types, like who, can barely dunk a basketball. He is a good athlete, and he has slashing and cutting ability. It's not all just jump shots. And I think that's something. So when you talk about a 3-level scorer, I think Dalton Knecht is the best 3-level scorer as of right now in the draft.
I agree with that. Even having him at 19, I would definitely agree with that. He is a very legitimate, explosive athlete. He has very noticeable first step burst, which is not necessarily something you would think would be present in like an older, right? Like someone of that archetype that's older. You wouldn't really think that they would be like a supreme athlete, but he, by all means, like on court, is a very, very good athlete. If you want just one clip that encapsulates his athleticism, pretty much watch his dunk. I believe it's over Xavier Booker. From when they played Michigan State. It just absolute like baptism in transition. He is capable of doing that not only at the college level, but I definitely think he's athletic enough to do that in the NBA as well. I don't think he'll like struggle to get to the rim or create separation or a lot of the things that you hear about players of that ilk that aren't like high level prospects or like project to be like all NBA, like lead options. Like typically like the microwave scorer or whatever you would want to call Dalton Knecht is like slightly less athletic. He does not fit that bill at all. That's not going to be where he comes up short on that end. So yeah, I mean, even having him that low, like I can't disagree with really, or can't like knock anything about him as a scorer. He is efficient from all three levels. He is efficient in every single type of shot, like off the catch. He shot 42.3% from three last year. Off the dribble, he was not very good, but you could obviously took 53 off the dribble 3-pointers in 30 games. So he's taking more than one of them per game and shot, I think, 29% on them. So with any sort of like consistency improvement or any like rhythm development that's going to go up or down or fluctuate, and that's obviously still enough to give him gravity from that level. Great free throw shooter that gets to the line often. Like just not, you can't knock him when it comes to him putting the ball in the basket. There are very, very few areas where he comes up short.
Yeah, just under 6 free throw attempts per game, which is super impressive. Shot 77% from the line. Like you say, like initiates contact well, goes into defenders, does all these little things, uses his size extremely well. And it's not just the skill set that we talked about, it's also the decision making. Like I was watching the Auburn game. He had a pull-up three on Broome, the big center from Auburn, who's probably going to be an NBA draft prospect next year. The next play, Broome plays it a little bit higher, wants to take away the three. Fine. Drive by, in for the dunk. The next time, gets to the mid-range. Like he's jabbing, and every time you try and adjust to kind of take away what he did last time, he's able to go, okay, well, now I'm going to take what you give me in return. And that's the kind of meta game where like the best scorers, they're able to adjust and read the defense accordingly so. And that's something that really stuck out for me. And on top of that, he hit some really clutch shots all year. I mean, that Tennessee team had really bad spacing around him. It was like, it didn't really often get him the ball in great situations. Like he had a lot of times just kind of go ahead and make a bucket. And he made some massive clutch shots on the road. And I think definitely showed a level of bravery, clutch, whatever you want to call it. Hard thing to measure, but whatever it is, Dalton Knecht does have it. And that does count for something.
He is a gamer. That much you can say for sure. He is built for the moment. He's not going to shy away from anything. Is obviously, having taken the path that he did, is someone that is very, very confident in his ability, and for good reason, because at last season at Tennessee, he averaged 22 and 5. The year before that at Northern Colorado, he was a 20-point per game scorer. Like he knows exactly what he's good at, and he knows that in any moment of the game, like that is how he's going to be able to impact his team and help them win. And he takes full advantage of that skill set. He had, I think, a 40-point game against Kentucky. He had a 37-point game as well. I forget who that one was against, but he just has a ton of prolific scoring outings this year. 39, I think, against Florida, 36 against Georgia. Like he was just absolutely killing teams all year off at scoring wise, and it was pretty much always efficient. He had a 5-game slump at the end of conference play, or at the end of non-conference play, leading into conference play. He had 8 points against Mississippi or Ole Miss, and then came back with 28 against Mississippi State. So had about a 2-week long slump, and then just went right back to normal. So very consistent, has really no like worry about him in terms of his scoring and whether or not that will translate, because he's just done it so efficiently with such high level production for now 2 years, but especially this past year in the SEC.
In terms of playmaking, this could be a short conversation. There isn't much. He had more turnovers than assists in 2 of his 3 college years. Even this year, he was 1.7 turnovers, 1.8 assists. So I guess you can call that progress because it's technically a positive assist to turnover ratio. Look, he was not really asked to do anything. He was just asked to basically finish plays. And you could maybe make that argument for him, the lack of spacing around him. But throughout his career, he's just not been a guy who reads off at like defense as well to kind of make passes. It's crazy because he does it so well to like adjust what he does to score, but struggles to do it to kind of execute the pass. I saw some of his pick and roll possessions. really simple decisions. Like would sometimes make the right play. Like if two of them coming for him, he would move the ball quickly. But you're not really leveraging or creating any stress for the defense or messing up the other team's spacing by any kind of advanced reads of any type. So he really is a play finisher. He is not someone who kind of like just give him the ball and he's going to go be able to create for others. And that definitely takes some of the shine off his kind of like three-dimensional play.
This is exactly what makes me low on him. So to me, you're not going to be, or Dalton Knecht is not going to be somebody that is like a number one scoring option. If you're going to come off of the bench, which is probably what he does, at least to start out, you have to offer more than one thing to a team. That thing can be hyper elite. And it is very close to that, at least in the case of Dalton Knecht. Like I have very little doubt that his scoring is going to translate at an efficient level nonetheless. You need to be able to take advantage of that. He does not take advantage of that. He does not play basketball in a way that is like, I think, friendly at the NBA level. Like if he's not shooting well for an NBA team, he gives you nothing. Like that's different in college because you have other play and the game is just way different. Coaching has a significantly stronger impact on how things are handled in that type of event. Like if you're not giving a team anything for long stretches of play, you're having a shooting slump. Like Dalton Knecht is like a borderline, like unplayable guy. Like he offers you nothing as a passer right now. The only really thing that he can do is make those like dump off passes to his big men. And even then, like he's playing with guys that are enormous. Like he played with two guys that are 6'11" in Jonas Adu, JP Estrella. Those guys are like big dudes with soft hands. If he's doing that in the NBA, like if your only way to make plays is by like drop off passes to big men, that's just something that defenses are going to take away from you. Like they're going to realize that that's the only read that you can make. Just guard that, just keep their bigs in help and make sure that whatever like your big man doesn't roll into wide open space. And that's it. You have to pick the ball up and pass it out to somebody else. Like, and that's not a productive way to run your offense at all, is through a guy that can only make ball screen reads. I just don't see him being worth an extremely high usage rate at the NBA level without adding like a lot as a playmaker. And he doesn't seem to have really any like feel for the game, which like you said is so weird because he does like he knows how to score. Like he has a very good feel for where to put himself as a scorer. He does not have a feel for what to like do to manipulate a defense to put his teammates in a position to score. And that's just something that every on-ball NBA wing needs to do. And like he's going to be to some degree, at least, an on-ball player to be successful. Because if you're thinking of him as a guy that just flies off pin downs and really only finishes plays, why would you draft him in the top 10? That is, especially given his age, that is just a ridiculous proposition to me, like value-wise. So the playmaking to me is just like, I wish it was good. I really do, because I love watching him score the basketball. If you like basketball and you don't like watching Dalton Knecht put the ball in the bucket, then I'm afraid you don't like basketball as much as you think. But otherwise, there's just so many shortcomings to such a significant degree that it makes it hard for him to catch up, I think, given the 5 years of developmental runway that other guys are going to have to catch up to him in terms of the impact that his scoring brings. I don't think he does that in other areas of the game, unfortunately.
When he's in the game, he needs to have the ball to score because he'll be hurting you.
You've got your mic on mute.
If you're giving... I'm not mute, but can you hear me?
Oh. There we go. I heard that.
1 second, something's not working. Can you hear me?
Now I can, yeah.
In the NBA, if Dalton Knecht is on the floor, he needs to be given the ball to score, because otherwise he's hurting you, right? He's not creating shots for other people. We'll talk about the defense in a minute. That's a real struggle for him. And do you want to take the ball out of LaMelo Ball's hands, out of Brandon Miller's hands, and put it in Dalton Knecht's hands? Like, no. There's a lot of talented players in the NBA who are like, Dalton Knecht is a good 3-level scorer. There's a lot of even better ones in the NBA. So, like, I think he's much better suited to like that kind of like sixth man role. I think I had some comps recently. I did a thing which is like a Norm Powell role, like off the bench, like let him come in, put up shots. I think that's like his kind of ceiling for me is playing that off the bench, high volume scorer. Which look in this draft, that I do think is probably like worth a lottery pick, and that's why I've got him there. But it's not, I don't think, some super interesting upside. Just because, like I said, there's offensive shortcomings outside of the shooting scoring, but mainly because of the defense. And we're going to have to talk about this. Look, he is a smartish team defender, but when you're 23 years old, like you just played so much more basketball than other people. You've seen more schemes and concepts. That's just to be expected, right? If he is left on an island, it is going to be a struggle for him. He is going to be attacked. You saw Vasily Micic talking the other day. He basically said to international media, he was like, they're like, what did you learn about playing in the NBA? He was like, if you're white, they're going to go at you time and time again. And I can tell you right now, Dalton Knecht, people are going to be licking their lips when he steps on the floor, right? They're going to be going at Dalton Knecht from the minute he comes in the game. And like that is just mentally draining, right? When every time you come on the floor, like you have all-star players you've grown up watching being like, him, I want him. Come set a screen, bring Dalton Knecht up, let me attack him. That's going to be a bit of a concern. The screen navigation isn't good. He was on a strong defensive Tennessee team, like as bad as they were on offense, that I think maybe kind of didn't put him in a position to show his maybe playmaking. Like they were in a position where they covered all of his defensive issues. Like they were a really good defensive team. I think they had Ziegler on that team. That might have been all defense for the league. So the defensive side, I don't know how he gets on the court. Like best case, it's like a Pat Connaughton situation. He had some moments, but he was playing with like Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo behind him, right? Who are two of the best all-worldly defenders of all time. So to have those guys out there, I don't know if there's any hope on that. He has size, he has athleticism and foot speed. I guess that's maybe where you point to like the likes of Doug McDermott, who other people I remember as like an older shooter guy. He does not have the speed or the athleticism that Knecht has. So maybe there's some late tapped upside there, but by now you'd expect that to be shining through. I mean, he should be a good defender by the age of 23, with just like natural strength, understanding of the game. And he wasn't at Tennessee. And I know I'll let you talk about this. He wasn't at the University of North Colorado either before Tennessee.
Yeah, so that is what really sours me on his defense. Like, you can just go back and look at the per game numbers, like just for a look into that. Like at Northern Colorado, his second year there is technically his like senior year, his fourth year of college basketball. He averaged 0.8 steals, 0.6 blocks. His year at Tennessee, 0.7 steals, 0.6 blocks. Just no difference. Like it's not like he was averaging a steal and a half and 0.8 blocks when he was playing at a lower level. He just doesn't impact the game on that end like at all. And like you said, he's 23. He's been playing basketball his whole life. He's not somebody that's new to the game. He is by all means a positive athlete, an above average athlete in terms of like his explosiveness, his foot speed, his strength. He's 6'6", I think, with like a slightly positive wingspan, like an inch or two longer than his height. He has no physical or like experience or background reason to be a bad defender. It's just because to me, he just doesn't have the ability. It's just not how he is wired as a basketball player to play defense. Like, and that's not just like he just gets beat one-on-one. Like, I have a bunch of notes on this stuff. Like, he has some of the worst closeout footwork and technique that I've ever seen from somebody at that age. He takes the longest, widest steps to guys that he knows can either shoot and you need to get up and contest and be taking like choppy steps so you can be there quicker and just be more available to move if you need to, or it's somebody that's just pump faking and going to drive by. He jumps at so many up fakes at any level of the court. Like if somebody gets him in the mid-range on his back, like, and they do any sort of like up fake on a turnaround, he's going to jump right up and try to block the shot, maybe get called for a foul. Otherwise, they're just going to do some sort of like step through and just finish or pass or whatever they got to do. He is like such a long road away from even being a neutral defender that it's really hard to me to be like a one-way player in the NBA unless you're one of the best players in this goddamn league. Like Luka Doncic can get away with taking some defensive possessions off, or he can't, as we're seeing in the NBA Finals right now. It's not really going very well for him in that regard. Like someone like Dalton Knecht can't not play defense. Like how are you going to provide positive value to your team over the course of an entire season, or even like a 10 or 15 game sample size, if you're just like a negative defender pretty much regardless of your matchup? Like terrible mechanics on closeouts, jumps at fakes on the 3-point line, bad screen navigator despite being pretty strong, and just doesn't get any steals or blocks that will at least like save you getting beat by turning possessions into like fast break opportunities for your own team. Like he doesn't do any of those things. Like I want to like him so bad, but he just checks no boxes for me. And in terms of like what I look for in a prospect outside of his scoring, like, and that's to say like nothing about the fact that he doesn't play make. Like he's not even an offense only player in the sense that like Baylor Shireman would be, because he's a guard. Like he makes plays for his teammates. He has deep shooting range, like all that stuff. He doesn't play defense either, but he at least passes and adds like a second skill. Dalton
and rebounds the hell out of the ball.
Exactly. He does not add any like ancillary skill, and he just isn't good enough or talented enough, I think, to do that.
So the reason I think I'm a little higher is, one, like you said, he has the size, he has the length, that I actually think that there could be a path, right, if he buys it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd love to know what his interviews are like, all right? Because is it just that he's always been asked to go out and be like his team's best scorer on the floor? And he's never had to really buy in to be a defender, to like get on the floor. Like he went to JUCO. He'll have been so good there, like compared to the level of competition, he will have probably not had to buy in. He then went to Northern Colorado and then ended up at Tennessee this year, and he was surrounded by players and he was asked to score. Now, maybe the NBA is different. Maybe he gets to the league and he does get targeted. He goes, that I need to start like focusing on this stuff. Like it's not just about my offense anymore. I'm going to be a 12-point per game scorer. To get on the floor, I need to offer two-way play. That's the only other thing. But like for that not to have clicked by the age 23 is pretty concerning. I mean, I know you've done some work already looking at guys drafted over the age of 22 since, was it 2020 or the 2021 draft? Do you want to give off that list of names, Chase, of guys who I know you talked through? And it's just not a great list of returns. And this is one of the reasons that I really like Knecht, but it's where your eyes tell you one thing and like all of the NBA history is telling you another. And you have to try and like have that internal battle, which is difficult to have. Like I had it with Chris Duarte. I loved the tape of Chris Duarte so much. And I said to me, if this old senior doesn't work like in this draft, then I'm never going to ever let myself be tricked into again of kind of like being in to be high on basically a senior in the draft lottery. Like I'm just not going to do it. And he had a good first year. I was feeling really good about Chris Duarte. Then it all changed. And Chris Duarte, I think he was 24. He was 24 on draft night. So you could argue that, you know, Knecht is a year younger than Duarte. And that, hey, there's a guy who was older than Knecht on draft night. But that is a huge concern.
I mean, Chris Duarte is a perfect example. First year, rookie year, 13 points per game on pretty good efficiency. That was 21-22. This past year in his third season, his first year with Sacramento, 3.9 points per game, 12.2 minutes per game. Just drastically reducing his role as it becomes evident that it's not like really sustainable for him to be as efficient as he was as his rookie season, like for the rest of his career. But that list you were talking about, I have a list of players here that I've been doing for a piece on Devin Carter, which this is going to really tie it all together as to why I'm high on him and not on Knecht. So these are the lottery picks since 2021 that were 21 years of age or older on the night that they were drafted. That is Cam Johnson, Obi Toppin, Davion Mitchell, Chris Duarte, Ochai Agbaji, and we could loop in Corey Kispert as well because he was the 15th pick. That's not an inspiring list of names, like especially if you're talking about drafting him at 6 or really anywhere inside the top 10 or the lottery. That's not good. Like the best that you're getting right there is Cam Johnson. the differences between the way that Dalton Knecht and Cam Johnson approach the game and their role on the team is vastly different, both in the NBA and in college. Like Cam Johnson was not like a high usage, like on ball scorer in the way that Dalton Knecht is. And Dalton Knecht is not, I think, going to translate to being a super efficient, like off ball, like movement shooter in the way that Cam Johnson is, at least right away, because that is a role that Cam had been used to playing for his whole life. He didn't have to like scale anything downward. Like Knecht is going to have to change the way that he thinks about himself as a basketball player to fit in with what a team is asking of him. And if a team is asking him to be the type of player he was at Tennessee, I am afraid that that team is going to be exceptionally poor. So I just can't put him that highly. Whereas with someone like Devin Carter, who is 22, a year younger, very athletic, like pretty much the same thing in terms of like, is that old and is popping now despite having played basketball his whole life. Devin Carter is a tenacious defender, like potential, like all defense caliber defender, on top of being an extremely good like P&R playmaker, a guy that can actually like read the game and initiate an offense and make plays for his teammates, like set the table and be somebody that could play like backup point guard or starting point guard even. Like Dalton Knecht doesn't do any of those ancillary things or even have like a third skill to add like Devin Carter does on top of having that athleticism that is like already NBA ready. So it's like the threshold for Knecht being a higher level prospect wouldn't be that high. He just has yet to meet it in an extremely long basketball playing career. So that gives me very little hope that it's going to happen going forward. Like he's not like a developmental story. Like he's somebody that has been playing basketball for 5 years. Like, you know, it's just not, it's not like the same type of thing in that way. Like you can bank on someone's development and say like they came to basketball late, but I feel like he just doesn't check any of those boxes. And it's a lot of projection to say that he's going to get better at certain things, that he's just shown no flashes of doing so.
And you'll know more about this stuff than me. The fact that you have to go to JUCO at high school, could that be a amber flag for teams that they dive into in terms of like his maturity, his, I don't know, his IQ, his work ethic? Like, I don't know as much about why people end up at JUCO, but like, or is that kind of a pretty common thing that can happen for a variety of reasons? Like every situation is different. I don't know his in detail. There could be a very good reason, like something happened when he was at school and it meant that, you know, he couldn't take his schoolwork as seriously as hoping, but could that be a cause for concern?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know his situation either, but it definitely could be because like maybe his transcripts or his paperwork just got messed up in some way, or he like wasn't going to go D1 or get a scholarship and couldn't get financial aid or something like that and ended up going JUCO. There are a lot of reasons that you could end up taking that route without it being like your own fault, I guess, or something that you've like done to yourself. But obviously that is a possibility.
Yeah.
Right. It certainly like that isn't like out of the question entirely. And that is something NBA teams do care about, like maybe more than the public may think. I feel like the NFL has the perception of like in their draft meetings, like really grilling you about who you are as a person and like how smart you are. Like they ask you to solve like math problems or give you like open-ended like essay questions or something like that. Like NBA teams care about that stuff to a pretty significant degree as well. And if they think that he's like, I mean, I'm not saying this is at all true or would be like a negative sign or a sign of like bad character, but like if they don't think he's like a super intellectual guy that maybe hasn't grown that much from that time, I could definitely see that like hurting his stock if that is like what a team like, or if that's like the conclusion that a team comes to. But again, I have no idea like what his situation is specifically, but like if you don't know, then you don't know and you can't like rule anything out necessarily. So got to keep it all in the realm of possibilities.
Let's move on to his fit on the Charlotte Hornets. Look, I think it's pretty clear. I think it's actually a really clear and obvious fit. The Hornets have a gap at shooting guard. He would fit next to Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball. That would be an extremely talented outside shooting kind of three guys to kind of put around Mark Williams. Would be very interesting. You have playmaking in both Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball as well. So maybe his lack of playmaking doesn't hurt you as much. The defense is an issue because LaMelo's not a great defender. Knecht's not a great defender. Brandon Miller, I think, has probably got the best defensive ceiling of those guys, but I think it dropped off as the season went on this year. I still believe in his defense long term, but that's the big question. And as I said earlier, I think he's better suited to be a kind of a bench role. And in that case, like, he would quite easy probably take the Seth Curry role as that kind of like off the bench scorer. But that's not a thrilling proposition at the 6th pick. So I think it's obvious where he fits positionally. The defense, I just don't know how this team would ever be a good defensive team when it's been one of their biggest weaknesses for 2 years now, for more than 2 years, for the last 4 or 5 years. How would you do that with Dalton Knecht starting shooting guard? I just don't know.
I don't know either. I'm kind of out on drafting players that don't play on both ends of the floor to some degree. Like, if they drafted him, at 6, I would be a little bit, confused by that one, let's say. But I mean, if they traded back to 14, 15, 16, something like that, and this is the guy that they like the most in that range, like, I could definitely talk myself into that. Like, I only have him at 19 as a part of an extremely large tier that goes basically from like the latter half of the top 10 to a couple players after him. So like I do think there is a way that he becomes like a long-term NBA player, at least somebody that's worth drafting in the top 20. And with Charlotte, like, that actually might be one of the better teams to realize that potential, just because, like you said, it's such a clear fit, at least on the offensive end of the floor. And in an ideal world, he comes off the bench, he plays next to Cody Martin, he plays next to Nick Richards, Mark Williams, whoever's at the 5. Like, you can just configure those lineups. Brandon Miller, like you said, doesn't experience maybe that like drop off that he had at the end of the year. He just kind of gets back to what he was at the beginning and is like a pretty good, like, physical defender that plays a lot harder than you would think for how thin he might be. Like, there is a world where Knecht fits alongside all of those guys. It's just like not at number 6, I think, is basically where I would land on that. Like, he does fit with the team pretty clearly. It would just be a poor use of your draft pick value if they took him at 6. But I honestly, like, I don't think they will. I just think it's a consideration, I think. And this time of the year, that's exactly what you should be doing, is considering everything. And then, you've got 2 weeks from now to make your final decision. So plenty of time to sort all these things out and figure out where Knecht lands in the hierarchy.
Yeah, it's very interesting how Knecht seems to have a higher stock amongst the NBA teams than a guy like Devin Carter, when then you probably look at the draft community, it's flipped. And you can look at that and go, Devin Carter is a better defender, he's a better rebounder, he's probably a little bit of a better playmaker. What is Dalton Knecht better at? 3-point shooting, and he has like better size and shooting. That is the only argument. But maybe in the NBA, that is just like valued more than like a versatile 6'2", 6'3" guy, right? I don't know. I'm just curious to see how it plays out. Where like you say, you look at two-way play, versatility, but maybe it is just that simple. It's just he's got size and he can shoot a better ball. Like, a Devin Carter is undersized 2 guard, and he has 1 year track record of shooting the ball. He might not be a good shooter, and like if Devin Carter can only shoot at 32% in the NBA, then all those other skills still might not be good enough for him to like be on the court in big leverage minutes. So I'm really interested to see how this like plays out, because they are both older players in the draft, very different archetype, and the one who's kind of seems to be a little bit simpler seems to be the one higher rated by teams.
I very succinctly said, I think, like, when you put it one way, the ceiling that Dalton Knecht provides, while it isn't as high as like a Devin Carter, who has really like palpable like two-way impact, you can see it already in college and very easy to see that translating to the NBA. That ceiling, while albeit a bit lower, may be more valuable just in terms of like the average NBA team. Like, do you need like how many 6'3" athletes that can shoot from range off the dribble, defend the point of attack and switch up a few positions, rebound well for their size as well? Like, how many of those players do you need on your team? One, probably. Like, sometimes depending on your roster construction, you might not need one at all. How many wings do you need that are around 6'6", can score at all 3 levels, are athletic, and are extremely efficient 3-point shooters, whether that's off the catch, off of movement, or any type of like other action. Like every team needs at least 2 or 3 of those. Like Dalton Knecht may have a slight or smaller percentage chance of like, landing in an NBA best 100 players in the league list or something like that. But what he provides for a team, especially if a team can look at their own player development staff and their own roster and say, we think we could make this work, like it might just be more valuable. And while I have him a lot lower, like I don't work for an NBA team. So to a certain degree, you kind of just have to chalk it up and say like, it makes sense, because that evaluation, like that process is at least like very sound. And I think that is something that is going to play in Dalton Knecht's favor. It has been already, is like, it's at least a sound process that you take in liking him. Like it's very easy to see like, or convince yourself, I guess, of like what his impact might be and how that would help a team. Whereas with other players, it's not as easy, even if the theoretical upside is significantly higher. So that's, I think, going to work in his favor in the long run in terms of his stock anyway, when it comes to him, playing out his NBA career and how successful that ends up being. We'll see in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see if Dalton Knecht ends up being a Charlotte Hornet. I know you said you're going to be a little bit confused, but because Chase is really nice, what he means is he's going to be unexplainably angry and probably furious. And that's what he really means there. So that's all. Maybe I want them to take Dalton Knecht just so I can see your reaction in draft night, and I can see you trying to talk yourself into the 23-year-old who can't defend. But that is it for our Dalton Knecht episode. We hope you enjoyed the listen, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody. See you later.